Mr. Damian Kohal, Dean, Faculty of Medical Sciences. Our featured speaker, Miss Connie Bell, faculty and staff of the University of the West Indies, students, specially invited guests, ladies and gentlemen. I am delighted to welcome you to our second lunchtime lecture for the week and the second of 3 presentations for this month. I'm going to take this opportunity to encourage you to come back on Monday to hear Dr. Wendy Seeley as she does the presentation for International Nurses Day. These lunchtime lectures are being hosted by a subunit of campus libraries, the Faculty of Medical Sciences Library, in collaboration with the Faculty of Medical Sciences. I am Dr. Janine Knight, Medical Librarian. Today's lunchtime presentation proposes to be an interactive session, thus allowing our stakeholders to engage in productive and valuable conversations about the current subject matter. This intimate setting, this is our library reading room, further presents an opportunity for you to fully engage our presenter. I urge you, therefore, to take advantage of this space and engage our presenter, who is here to share her knowledge and experience as we look forward to a meaningful exchange of ideas, knowledge, and experiences. I am now inviting to the podium the Dean of the Faculty of Medical Sciences, Dr. Damian Kohal, to offer brief remarks.
Welcome again, everyone, to this very busy but certainly informative and inspiring week of activities in the Faculty of Medical Sciences. Today we have a marquee event which will close off this very inspiring, sobering, and needless to say, reflective week, which highlighted not only the launch of the Cesar Cyrus Caribbean Medical Museum, of Medical History, but would have highlighted key components to the matter of creating artifacts, stories, experiences that are unique to the Caribbean, unique to our heritage, unique to our culture, and emphasize the need for us, with this launch of the museum, to use this as the single most important catalyst towards mobilizing a more equitable approach towards recording and narrating our own stories. So while the museum may be about curating medical history in the Caribbean, note that it creates an opportunity for us as Caribbean people and people of the African diaspora and other important indigenous legacies from whichever part of the world which converged here in the Caribbean, to know that we now have a platform which will allow for us to record and do justice to our heritage and also to plan the way forward. And that's exactly what today's lecture is about: mobilizing our thoughts and plans about the future. And we have with us, and I'm not going to read a bio this time like I did, at yesterday's panel discussion, right? I will allow Dr. Knight to do the necessary deeds. But we have with us a very unique speaker, unique in the sense that her background, her area, is very much within the space of decolonizing the archive and, all the elements of what I said prior to highlighting today's speaker. is really about decolonizing the archive. As you know, the matter of our history or curating our history has always been led by the global north, you know, the colonizers, the navigators, who were able to capture unique elements about our ancestors' practices and knowledge. We know as a people that we have come from humble beginnings, and our ancestors were just as humble as us. They were more into oratory creation. We now have an opportunity to immortalize a lot of that knowledge, history, and artifact in a way where we now will be able to demonstrate ownership, an appropriate ownership. Ms. Bell's work speaks to unpacking, you know, the colonization of not only our history heritage, but the archive of peoples who were considered marginalized, and she'll be able to speak more to that during her presentation. My role as dean really is just to set the ground, you know, to set the fertile ground to enable such a discussion here with this group here physically, but also to encourage other viewers of this lecture going forward, as it will be captured by video recording, to reflect on the words that are mentioned, reflect on the questions, the comments that emanate out of today's talk, to be able to assist each and every one of us in our own pathway finding towards our own respective destination. So without no further ado, I pass back over to the moderator, who will be able to introduce our speaker, and then we get into today's talk. Yeah.
Okay, please permit me to introduce you to our featured speaker. Ms. Connie Bell is a UK-based practitioner and co-founder of Decolonizing the Archive and University of Repair. This is a Pan-African living archive based in the United Kingdom that seeks to facilitate heritage-based therapeutic inventions for people of African heritage. As a consultant, memory worker, and cultural producer, her work explores the colonial methodologies, and memory as technology within archives. Her doctoral research at Royal Central School of Speech and Drama focuses on the archives of Caribbean theater. Currently, Ms. Bell is the creator of the overarching course module, Museum Restitution, following the success of the Correcting or Collecting Community Archive course launched 2 years prior. Ms. Bell's presentation is titled Curation of Caribbean Heritage, a Segue to the Future. Please welcome Ms. Bell.
Short in it. Hi, everybody. Thank you for making the effort to come out. I know you all have, Barbados is so fabulous. You all have things to do and the sun is hot and the sea is calling. But you're here today to hear what I have to say, so I really hope I give you food for thought. Okay, so I want to commence, first of all, by saying thank you to the Dean of the Faculty of Medicine. Thank you as well for the introduction. Dr. Damien Cohol for firstly having the vision to work in solidarity with previous research accumulated here at the university, alongside a highly trained team, archivists, other deans who used to be deans and all of that. You have complemented the task with what the writer Natasha Martin calls the Black imagination. But to take it a step further, you have invited further colleagues, such as myself, to inject an ongoing critical reflection to both the physical manifestation of the Cecil Cyrus Medical Museum and to the positionality that the museum needs to have and will be in service of. It begs the question, who will you be in service to? This was commented yesterday when we were in a panel discussion, and it was very lovely because we had everyone from the same space kind of giving to the ideas of how are we going to take this forward as a community. As such, Dr. Kohler, I just want to big you up again for instructing this practice for a living and sentient archive to have a dialogical discourse, firstly with the people of the Caribbean and the African diaspora, and thereafter, hopefully, the rest of the world. I'm proud to share my observations through a decolonial lens and to be here with you all at this auspicious moment in history. I say auspicious because a lot's going on, as you know. To begin, I ask that we engage with the topic, a curation of Caribbean heritage, a segue to the future within the context of the Cecil Cyrus Medical Museum, and also to engage with it as a conversation. So therefore, I'm going to be asking you questions. I'm not just going to be talking at you. I want you to engage with me. I think it's highly important that we contextualize things in the way that we've been brought up. And this is how we do it. We reason. And so my objective is to engage you in a meaningful exchange of information that affords you, the audience, to become a participant in building a legacy and future based upon your own knowledge, based upon your own narratives, and based upon your vision for the future. This is what we call a practice engaged in futurity. I was honored last night to attend the launch of the Cecil Cyrus Medical Museum and to meet his family alongside being introduced to friends and colleagues. It was a rich and expansive moment, especially when noting the archive. I had a good conversation with the archivist, and it was wonderful to see how important it was for the person archiving all of this information to be involved in a way that allowed her to bring in her vision as well for the legacy of the museum. I say all this because as we can see, it's important that everyone that's engaged at every single level is part of this story and this narrative. And if you are to engage with anything that involves community and to engage with anything that involves the future, you have to have this component always in mind. Now, I have a question for you. How many people knew of Dr. Cecil Cyrus before this whole event and program? Brilliant. I thought as much. I just wanted to see it in the room. We could possibly do another case study another time. So, not many people. And I'm noting also that the few that have put up their hands are very actively engaged in that space for the university, so it goes hand in hand. Now, this is primarily part of the whole decolonization discussion. When we are talking about inclusion, are we just talking about people who have the privilege and opportunity to enter into institutions, to engage with the knowledge and histories of our people? Or are we saying to the wider community, we are engaging your history and you an opportunity to engage with us who have also studied you, but also engaging your opportunities and your rights and visions towards this? Yeah? So it's important again to note that when we're approaching, this is a standpoint that we should start to engage with. Please make a note of it because I'm coming all back to it. My next question to you is, what do you think is the role of medicine? Anyone? I'll look at other people as well. What do you think is the role of medicine? I'll come back to you.
The role of medicine, in which context?
Well, I did start off by saying within the idea and aspect of the Cecil Cyrus museum that's happening here. So in that sense, you could take it from that, but you can do it individually from your own, what you think medicine is to you.
Medicine to me is the construct of health and or health as persons in the Caribbean region, where we take care of ourselves, the doctors, nurses that we celebrate, is health and wellness from all aspects, in my opinion.
That's a very good answer. Anyone else? To cure people, that's brilliant. Anyone else from the back? To treat diseases, brilliant, yes. To heal, yes. To care and heal. I'll come back to that healing word, it's so powerful. Anyone else? One more. research. Brilliant. So all of your answers are correct. Now, I'm only going to be speaking a little bit of this because I'm not going to take it for granted that everyone was here last night. So I'm going to give a little background and context for those who were online or in the future might want to look back at this. So Dr. Cesar Cyrus was an anatomy doctor trained in ophthalmology and obstetrics. Oh, this is terrible. I can't say it for me. What's the word? Obstetrics, right there. Obstetrics. 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 I'm not going to repeat that word again. But thank you for the communal learning. And opened the private botanic hospital in 1976. He worked with limited staff and facilities, and as such, he invented equipment to support his medical practice and to support his community in St. Vincent. His famous quote was to make do. Now, make a note of that as well. My next question to you is, before I go there, let us analyze from a traditional African and Indian epistemology and juxtapose it with a Western approach into our ideas of what medicine is. Now, within the African and Indian epistemology, traditional, I might add, they tend to look at it as a holistic approach that considers the interconnectedness of the body, mind, and spirit, incorporating natural remedies, spiritual practices, and social healing methods. The bane of their practice is to have the community holistically healthy and incorporating natural remedies. Now, within that context, the resource and reflection is always on cultural identity. So they're drawing from that pool of knowledge to what constitutes their identity, to heal them. Now, the role of medicine from a Western lens, using the Hippocratic Oath, states that this outlines that the ethical responsibilities of physicians is to emphasize their duty to benefit patients and to avoid harm. It also emphasizes the importance of confidentiality and the pursuit of knowledge to improve medical practice. Now, history has taught us that the last line, the pursuit of knowledge to improve medical practice, has been questionable in regard to their pursuit of knowledge to improve medical knowledge, and has brought many a harm to African, Indian, and indigenous communities. Now, through the evidence of eugenics and scientific racism, we see that the sense of incorporating a humanity or ethical structure in their ambition to research has been in contestation. It's been problematic. Now, with that in mind, I draw on another example that was brought up yesterday in our conversation with the panels. And what was said was that in our notion of understanding how we improve our ideas of who owns things and how we improve our ideas of ethics comes really as a new question into the practice of medicine. It has been explained that proverbial research acknowledges that the universal need to involve the ethical question in regards to cultures that have, especially cultures that have been undergone the tortures or traumatic experiences, should also be taken into consideration, and that legacy thereof. Now, I argue that a patient's cultural heritage, spiritual practice, if any, economic circumstance, geographical location, and hereditary history, all of which will give us a more comprehensive understanding of the patient, is a narrative that should not only be instituted for the doctor, but should be instituted in the practice in terms of when we talk about good practice, when we talk about good practice in terms of meeting medical conditions, but also good practice meeting with social conditions. Now, if we were to build this idea around a museum and curating an experience that will take our communities and take our minds as individuals, healthy individuals, into the future, these are concepts that we need to start engaging with. but not engaging with in an academic sense where you write a paper and you give a lot of quotes and refer it to a lot of men who've written great things, but not necessarily true, based upon the communities that they've drawn this information from. We then have to start saying, how are we going to liberate our approaches? Yeah? It's about liberation, and it's about evolving. So, in the book Freedom Dreams and Radical Imagination, D.J. Kelly asks, is it possible to reconcile reparations for slavery and structural racism with decolonization? He defines decolonization as solidarity in motion. Now I ask you, what does solidarity mean to you or look like? Can I hear some random ideas around what that is? Solidarity. I'm going to choose some very attractive people now. That young lady in the back. You don't want to answer what solidarity is? No? Thank you. Agreement. No, you don't want to answer what solidarity, my goodness. What is solidarity? Nice. I love that. Synergy and working together. Now, when we think about this in context of the Cesar Cyrus Medical Museum, we think about how within the concept of working with others, working with the people, working with his patients, a whole idea and approach to medical practice was brought about and formulated. It was constituted so much that I would say there's a framework sitting there that possibly someone should do a PhD on. Because within that framework, we are seeing methods where traditional use, using the technology that you have at your disposal, as opposed to technology that you're going to spend a whole heap of money to get in and ask for funding in, but using what you have at your disposal, and also working with a team that has vision, can bring about extraordinary change. Now, when we talk about the notions of solidarity, we are also segueing ourselves into the future in a way that is formidable. And I say this because this concept examines us to look at demographics. It examines us to look at culture. It examines us to look at ourselves outside of what the capitalistic structure tells us to look at ourselves as. The way the capitalistic structure has designed us to analyze ourselves as a people and as a community has brought us to disengage with practices that would actually naturally lead us into a healthy lifestyle. And so we stand in opposition to a way of living that is dialogically opposed to our well-being. And so we see increases in mental health problems. We see increases in all sorts of diseases. I take it a step further. As Hilary Beckles had mentioned in some of his research, we see now that there is a legacy that has now aligned itself to our genetic gene pool. When we look in the case of diabetes, I dare say possibly if you push it a bit further, if you look further into prostate cancer for men, you might see something there too. So this tells us that we do have to start approaching these concepts and ideas and narratives in a very proactive way. Why? Because it's attacking our community. Why? Because it is now landing itself into our genetic gene pool and causing a scientific reaction that we are then permeating each time we give birth, each time we build. It was never there to begin with. So then we must disrupt it. And the only way to disrupt it is to start questioning it and setting up spaces such as the Cesar Cyrus Medical Museum, which will facilitate a conversation, yeah, and a dissection of both medical practices, but also that of traditional medical practices. And so instead of having two concepts being in opposition, which is what sometimes we find in Eurocentric learning spaces, whenever you have a contentious remark or a response to something, it always has to be put in an opposition. As opposed to saying, well, actually, maybe some of what you've said is correct, but some of it is not, and this is why. Critical engagement, critical conversation, bringing our community back into a case where they're able to critically analyze for themselves. Too often, we step into spaces in the learning environment, which is actually cultivating and conscientizing us to think in a way that is directly from the book. It's very rote. So therefore, when you ask a question, people are not able to draw from their genetic gene pool. They're not able to draw from the narratives of grandma and grandpa. They're not able to draw from experiences and a wealth of knowledge from their cultural concepts and cultural competencies because they have been told not to do so and have been cultivated not to do so. So the question beckons, when we talk about culture and cultural identity and curating a future, are we going to leave those things aside, or are we going to bring them with us? Yeah? And create a healthy environment where we're interacting with these and taking the best, bringing a Sankofa methodology that works. Because we're taking what is good and then saying to the stuff that isn't good, we'll leave you right there. Right? So, what is technology? And what does that mean to you? I ask you another question. Anyone? Come on now, archivist. Let's hear it. What is technology? That's a very good answer. Anyone else? What is technology? And what does that mean or look like to you? Yes? You think of connecting? Nice, nice. Anyone else? Let's take one more. Anything you can use to make your life easier. That's brilliant. Now, whilst machinery plays a dramatic role in our emotions and our notions of technology and bringing things together, like you said, connection, making life easier, we also have to start to consider, what if technology then presents itself in a way where it overrides us as human beings? Where it overrides your provenance over your archives, your artifacts, your mind, your body. We're not far from that reality, by the way. And so the idea of technology, whilst it's fantastic and great, if it is not grounded within an ethical structure that is about building the village, which is what traditional ideas around healing and concepts of medicine were originally born to do, then we are starting to have a problem that's being cultivated and conscientized among your students, among your families, amongst your friends. We have to then renegotiate our ideas around technology and also ask the question, apart from the fact that we wanted to build the community, what if we reached a point where technology destroyed us and we didn't have anything to lend to? I'm pushing you. I want you to think of these realities, because the idea is that when you are learning and when you are building, and I'm going to refer it back to Cesar Cyrus and how he did his work, you should be able to build back at any point in time. And if something is completely destroyed and taken away from you, you should have the capacity to draw from your cultural pool to be able to make it again or make it better. If that talent has been stolen from you because of whatever historical event has happened, then not only are you weakened, but you are on the precipice of complete annihilation. Now, Dr. Cesar Cyrus, one of his talents was to use whatever was at his immediate reach. That is a talent, yeah? And that is a talent that needs to be cultivated within the idea of this museum. Not only did he do that, but he surpassed the ideas around, oh, if we didn't get funding, we're not going to be able to do this. He didn't have that luxury. He pulled it off anyway. So much so to the point that I dare say he stepped into that area of genius because he built instruments to make his operations happen. Yeah? This is quite serious. Now, these are talents where when we rely only and solely on technology, we are unable to bring forth that type of practice from our brains, because the brain don't know what to do. The brain has never done it before, and it's like, right? So we have to ask ourselves, really, what is education doing right now to us? Is it actually building our capacity, or is it yeah? Is it devolving us? Yeah? We have to ask. We have to ask. And so, drawing on methodologies such as the Dogons in Africa, by the way, a community that looked at cosmology of the stars and didn't need NASA to tell them where Mars was. They were able to do so. And drawing on methodologies and epistemologies, examples like from what Guy Deptford calls what Guy Deptford calls the psychogeography, and what Latoinette Steins calls ancestral data or data. I don't know which one you do here. Yeah? These are powers and technologies at your use. Yeah, derived from the ground, sticks, utensils in your kitchen. You make use of it, and your imagination takes you there, and then you tap into a source that you've not disconnected with, and you make things happen. We see that Dr. Cesar Cyrus had that capacity, and he exercised it well. And so, therefore, what we're asking is to bring that narrative to life within the museum. Archivist, I'm throwing this at you. To bring that narrative, to bring that narrative to life and to make it real for the community so that they can see that it was done. A big problem that we have when we're talking about community and our young people and bringing that idea of the imagination to life, we talk at them and we say, oh, this can be done, that can be done, but we don't give them living examples within their time frame. I'm not talking about an example that is 200 years ago, 500 years ago. I'm talking about something that has happened within this context, within this era. And that's Cesar Cyrus and the work that he had done. Now, I'm quickly going to move on, because to land that one, he also built a hospital, just in case you guys might not know that he built a hospital as well in St. Vincent. Now, where am I? When we talk about digitizing, again, we see steps being made in regards to how information is archived. Here it is, ahead of his time, this genius, Dr. Cesar Cyrus, took photographs, x-rays, images. He accumulated these stories. So again, I position you to think, if we are to curate something for the future, how are we creating those spaces to accumulate? How are we creating those spaces to get those narratives and expressions in a way that can work for the future? We can draw again from the pool that Cesar Cyrus has left us with his archive. Now, the aim and objective of Cesar Cyrus's work was always to heal. Someone mentioned that at the very beginning of this conversation. Healing is what you think of when you think of medicine. And so in the words of the poet that spoke last night, she was fierce, Cindy Celeste, I would say that it proves that genius blooms in sea-salted air, which means that you are the geniuses here today, because these stories are your stories. You are here in Barbados, sea-salted air. You have the privilege of understanding the notions of what it means to be extracted and taken and to be reborn again and to create an identity based upon yourselves as Barbadians. You have an opportunity to even take it broader and to create your Caribbean identity and canon in whichever fashion you want to fashion your people. So within this context, I would examine wider the possibilities of incorporating an African Caribbean indigenous practice into our concepts and ideas around medicine, possibly pushing doors. I'm pushing doors here. You know, it's about you coming with things. But I'm just saying, this is what I would say, this is what this whole Cyrus Medical Museum is pulling on. Remember, I said we're doing it from the lens of Cyrus Museum. So let's keep that in context. Because what then you will understand by the end of this conversation is that you can use that blueprint for any other type of thing. Yeah? So that's why I'm positioning it like this, so you understand it properly and you feel it in your bones. So that any other project you want to do, you can use the same template, borrow from the same ideas, and place it there. Now, within the approach of the African Caribbean indigenous practice, we are asking for people to negotiate with ancestral knowledge. Now, that whole idea of ancestral knowledge has been taken away from us as a conversation that seems serious. Yeah? You enter into Eurocentric spaces and you start to talk about ancestors and they look the other way. It doesn't hold a scientific magnitude that they can relate to. And so we have to also understand that if we are to be honest with ourselves, we cannot leave that out. And too many times we're either been cultivated to be ashamed of this concept, or we just don't even know the notion because it was beaten out of us. And so the Cyrus Museum should be a space that provides an opportunity for what that young lady at the back said, to reconnect. That's the technology that space is. It's a reconnection technology, a reconnection hub. Now I move on to, if we are to create a Caribbean heritage that is a technological vehicle to segue us into the future and have us prepared for the unknown, then we need to invite conversations built up to negotiate with our competencies instead of destroying them. We are to lead in innovative models of practice and designing of tools that are leading for futurity and leading for community cohesion. Let it not live in silo with the rest of the world, but instead prepare itself to be able to offer knowledge should the wider community need it. You are at a wonderful and pivotal moment where you can offer that. You can offer and lead others, because you're a shining example. So again, within the context of who you are as a Caribbean people, and in the context of the Cyrus Museum, this is how you need to be picturing it. It's not just a conversation that's going to just sit and land up with Bajans, no. Because of course it's migrated archives. It came over from St. Vincent. So that's the first line, yeah? So when we talk about custodianship, in that regards, it is very much a St. Vincent People's Archive. But then they have understood the concept of solidarity. And so they have shared that information and knowledge with the Barbadian community in the hope that you will build and procure their archive. In regards to solidarity, they then move on to understanding that you have the technology to foster further education and to foster education in a way that is going to heal. Yeah? All right. So, let us understand that if we're talking about curating, we will need to also include the stories of how we came to the Caribbean, as this is a part of how our advancement and becoming is instituted within ourselves. The becoming story sometimes gets left out because some young people, you like we're talking like anyway, but anyway, right? Some young people and even some of us as elders do not want to talk about that story. I've had many opportunities in London and around the UK when I'm talking with African heritage communities, and I ask, oh, so how was that? How did you share that with your grandparents? How did you share that with your grandchild or whatever? They will say, oh, well, I'll give you an example. I'm from Ghana, or I'm from Nigeria, or but I don't know how to speak my language. Or Jamaicans who will say, I'm from Jamaica, but I never taught my family how to speak patois because that would, bring them out of their class structure. It would demean them. So what you have is, again, I draw back to the point of a conscientization that has told you that the things that constitute your narrative and your language and how you communicate are things that are associated with being dumb. Things that are associated with things that should be removed from you and extracted from you to make you a human being. But I'm now challenging that notion and saying within the concept of how things have gone with the Cesar Cyrus Museum and also how you need to be formulating in regards to a decolonizing idea and ideology, then you need to be experimenting with those notions. Did they do any good for you? You being removed from those stories? You know how to draw a T? You know how to draw a T if you're sick? You know how to draw a T if your foot hurting you? Do you? I'm asking you. Nobody not saying yes or no. I know the pharmacist in here can draw a tablet or two, but I don't know if they can draw a T. All right. So I'm going to quickly move on so you can ask me questions. I spoke about Caribbean indigenous practices, did I? And yes, I did. That negotiates with the heritage, of the people. Now, I would like you to explore some ideas with me. I'm going to show you a bit of the work that we do at Decolonizing the Archive. So I'm one of the co-founders from Decolonizing the Archive, along with a gentleman called Dr. Etienne Joseph, and we do this work in England, but we also take it across to parts of Europe, and we've been fortunate enough to work with the Black Archives in Amsterdam, which looks at the Surinamese community in the Netherlands. And that is a whole story right there again, and how these people hold on to their heritage to make sure that they can make it through that environment in the Netherlands. Yeah, that's what they do. So I'm going to show you a little bit of what that looks like. I'm going to try and do this myself. I'm going to show you a little bit of what that looks like. So you can kind of get an idea and push yourself to create ideas and around the work that you do. We have created 2 course programs because we recognize that there is a gap. There is a gap within the whole academic spectrum in regards to decolonization, restitution, and also, to a sense, self-repair. And we recognize that gap is, whilst it's good I'm here talking to you and exchanging my ideas with you, if you do not set up a space where those factors of learning and those iterations and ideologies get an opportunity to examine themselves and to practice themselves, then it doesn't really work. Because people need an opportunity to feel that they have a space that they can go to do that. So within that framework, we've created 2 courses. The Museum Restitution course, which addresses the approach that European museums have been doing with human body parts and showing them in public spaces and in the museums. And we've created a course where people become ethical enablers, and we call them ancestral, oh my God, I forgot my whole thing. Ancestral rights. So they look at ancestral rights because that's what they're looking at. Instead of calling it dead people or mummies, erroneously calling, they're not mummies. Yeah, they're ancestors, right? And so the course facilitates the community to become enablers, bringing in those ethical rights around human display. And we're actually challenging Parliament as we speak. So I'm going to show you a little bit of the work that we've been doing. This is us in Parliament with MP Ribeiro Addy, and also the head of Afri Mohair, Dr. Rudo Shihu. And I'm going to play you now some practical. These are the graduates speaking in Parliament based on the ancestral course, Ancestral Remains, Ethical Rights Enabler. That's what they became, and they were able to speak to Parliament. And now I'll show you a little bit more in terms of incorporating and bringing that interconnectedness between creativity and knowledge. I hope you can hear it properly.
Of great ancestors whose spirits are embodied in the many bronzes held at this museum.
To me, they symbolize so many things that are held captured in these institutions and disconnected from their cultural context. They're also a symbol of many other things that are held by institutions like Curation Museum, like the Ornament.
The purpose of this ancestral dedication is to remember, to commemorate, to honor and restore the humanity of our ancestors.
The fact that they made of these manillas.
The manila was also used to sell our ancestors of African heritage into slavery.
I'm proud to be here to witness, advocate for restoration.
I think it's really important for us to know our history so that we can move on and tell the next generation so that they can know who they are.
The dance that we did today is called Ajombo, and it's from the ancient kingdom of Dahomey. It is our privilege to revive this dance. We wanted to dedicate this dance to our ancestors and let them know through the song the Ajombo dancers are here and we will always be here.
We have not forgotten our commitment to you.
And then quickly, I will show you our other project looking at Hans Sloane's Fauna and Fauna collection, which we challenged. Dr. Cohol was part of that. Called Finding What Is Ours, Recovery, Repair, and Cognitive Justice. And we took them to task in, show you the video quickly. Which one is it?
Why are we here? We're here to learn new materials and knowledges that possibly some of us did not have the opportunity to get.
Once we're adults or we become agents of decolonization, we have to do a lot of unlearning.
I'm still digesting how much wisdom has come through and been shared. I've heard so much information and just the quality of that information.
If we want to reclaim what is ours, we must gain the knowledge.
It's the importance of this labor that is often unnamed, uncompensated, unarchived, unmarked. Who were those people? What was their name? How did they call themselves? What language did they speak? What names did they give to the various heritage that we are examining or reconnecting with?
And made me think deeper about how I'm going to connect back with people back home, what I'm going to teach them from what I've learned today.
I'm a big supporter of rebuilding black communities, and having events like this is really important, especially because it dives into the historical side of things.
We need to be more engaged and embracing indigenous knowledge. Let us not see it as unsophisticated, see it as wealth.
We will present to you a new way of thinking and a new way to push forward.
Okay, so I'm going to start closing off now. That's a taste of the kind of work that we do at Decolonizing the Archive on the other side of the water. And that's just also to give credence to the idea of involving community at every level and at every stage. That was a museum. The last thing you saw there was an actual museum program. And we were tackling the British Museum, the Natural History Museum, Chiswick Gardens, all of that in that program, which, as you could see, was very African-oriented. It wasn't, we brought ourselves. We didn't sell out. All right, so quickly now, I'm going to close off by saying, so you can ask me some questions. In our work at Decolonizing the Archive, the organization aims to ask questions around institutional spaces and how one survives, and surviving within the understanding of how we bring our culture. It is orientated towards conscientizing these practices and access points. Because right up to this point in history, we have been taught to live in silo and to be divided through ideas in terms of oppositional, constructive, we have been divided in regards to our approach to critical thinking, oppositional seen as oppositional thought instead of constructive. There is no interconnectedness with the scholarships in regards to community building and community knowledge sharing. And in regards to terminology such as humanity, we are seeing that this is a whole new subject area that needs to be readdressed. We have been taught ethical structures based upon a capitalistic system that does not include the care or futurity for Black and brown communities. It further does not consider the impact it has on the environment for all who live in the global planet that we call Earth. As such, if we are to segue into the future, we must consider these notions and concepts of protection and improve upon them in terms of safeguarding, using the technology that we have at our disposal. DTA has built 2 modules, which I mentioned already, so I won't go over that. But in moving forward, we then must re-examine the role of archives. And what do archives do to constitute a humanity that is moving forward towards global cohesion and lack of wars? Here are a few examples, as mentioned, the Cecil Cyrus Museum. So the question here that we ask is, how will you take this information, share it within your classrooms, share it amongst your friends, archive it, and build in a way that makes our future whole. This is how I believe that we will segue into the future. I thank you. Please feel free to ask me questions.
Yes, not a question, but a comment that may probably formulate a question. But first and foremost, I just want us to, give Ms. Bell another round of applause for excellent, inspiring talk. Connie, of course, having, worked with you prior, I know what you can unpack when you present and participate in social discussion fora and lecture halls such as this. But what I found fascinating about the presentation was that it aligns with where we are, and when I say we as a people, people of African diaspora, but also people of this Caribbean space, which is a mixture of culture and heritage. Trying to find our path. I like the fact that you were able to identify the museum as technology, because that is exactly what it is. Conversations with Alcion, who chairs the advisory board for the museum, private and public conversations. We spoke about the fact that it's a living space, that it's not static. And in fact, there was a back and forth. Well, it was a very cordial back and forth, because I was asked to write a piece for a press release about the museum, and I used the word monument. And then I was corrected to say that monument is not the correct word, because monuments are static, and a museum is not static. And what we're trying to portray with the museum is nothing that is static, but will be essentially a segue to the Caribbean future. And I think you did an excellent job of putting that together, touching on the nuances of custodianship, ownership, ethics, reparations and decolonization. And, and I'm fascinated that you were able to unpack all of that in your talk. My question is, and it's a very simple one, but outside of coming to the Caribbean, and make these contributions, how is that we as a university and as a society in the Caribbean could work with your organization more going forward?
Thanks for that question. Well, first of all, I think it would be good for us to set up exchanges. I think it's important that a bilateral conversation is set up, opportunities for participants, students on this side to experience their notions on the other side of the water, and the other side of the water to experience their notions of the Caribbean. And I think we also need to stay true in terms of the help and support each other can give. I think we should identify areas, and I think what Decolonizing the Archive would be good at in terms of conversations that we've had in the past is fitting where each one needs help. I know your archive might need a little bit of support there. You get some extra hands coming in. Your medical practice around the whole thing with traditional practices, all of that. So the idea is that when we unpack decolonization and what it looks like, that's what it looks like. It's solidarity in motion. It is not living in silo. It's not divisive. It's about giving true example to us as a diaspora, the Pan-African experience. We've been divided all over the world, and it's about us finding claim back. And so the fact that you actually have a space that's constituting that knowledge, that's home. That's an opportunity. Plus, it's sunny over here, isn't it? So yeah, in terms of facilitating that, we would be happy to share like the graduates from the programs that I was mentioning, museum restitution and correcting or collecting, with you guys over here in sunny Cave Hill, Barbados. Go on.
Thank you so much, Connie. I really enjoyed your presentation. But I guess out of all of this, it's, deconstructing what exists, as it were, from a colonial lens, especially as it relates to things such as descriptors that would come within, say, for instance, museum spaces.
Mm-hmm.
So how has your group dealt with actually that area of contestation, as it were, in these large institutions, in ensuring that, the voice of the, as I would say, the voice of the voiceless is actually put forward there and showcased in a palatable manner and also a manner in which is not demeaning to groups of people. So have you all had that type of engagement with these institutions?
Yes, I'm glad you brought that up. In the same finding, what is ours that we engaged with UCL and their, what they call it, Sloan Lab. That was what came about. And so what we held was a workshop for the community, but we paid the community to attend, because also you need to understand who your audience is. You mentioned that, which was a brilliant point about the audience and how important who we're catering to. We understand what they're going through. Many of our African heritage people over on the other side of the border, they're having a hard time. These institutions don't make it easy. And then they don't want to interface with the institutions, because when they do go, they're seeing that kind of cataloging and public description, which is quite demeaning. Who wants to engage with that? And so within the context of the workshop that we held, we actually pointed out to the museums, this was quite wrong. This was the issues that we had with it. This is how it should be worded. This does not include. But what we found within that particular workshop was that we then came up with a barrier of, okay, the museum has ticked their box. We've engaged some black folk in this exercise. We're done. So then we said, okay, no, you're not done. We still have something more to say about that. And so how we went about that now was to create a situation where the people created movements of what we call performative display. So what you saw with the dancing was us actually saying, this is how we will keep showing up in the spaces to let you see that this has been taken away. You have contextualized this particular narrative quite wrong about the Dahomey people. You have contextualized the ideas around the Benin bronze in a certain way that does not include the actual community in Africa. It concludes, you say you're going to return, but really there are so many more Benin bronzes, more than what you're claiming to return. And the questions around returning, what does that look like? All of that. And so the idea is that the community starts to take ownership by recognizing there is a problem. So a big part of the problem is we're not having that conversation.
No, because what we see happening, especially within the European context, for instance, as it relates to, say, for instance, museums, when there's this whole thrust towards the repatriation, there's always this misnomer that is put forward there, that they don't know how to take care of these things. So we can do better in terms of taking care of these artifacts or these documents. But these things were essentially raped and pillaged.
That's right.
From these spaces.
That's right.
And a lot of these things have ancestral meaning.
That's right.
And also is very endemic to the community, as it were, in terms of their practices.
That's right.
And venerations and so forth. So, and I think even when I went to school there, that was something that was always an issue of contention, but it still pervades today.
Yes. And you've just answered a question. So the reason why the museums are able to throw that rhetoric out, which makes absolutely no sense, but they're able to throw that rhetoric out is because the algorithm and the response from the people is almost none. The people don't know. Or if they do know, their ideas and notions around it have been so traumatized that they're not engaging it with that topic in a critical way where they can assess it and say, well, actually, give me back my things. But they can't do that. So the museum has that power because not enough people know, there's no algorithm around the people saying, well, actually, no. So this, again, is the issue. So then they can throw out a notion that you can't take care of your own stuff. Yeah?
Thank you. Thank you, Connie, for the talk. First on that point about returning objects and so
yes.
on. The whole point about restitution and a decolonial approach to the idea of restitution is it's not just about returning the objects, it's also about returning the capacity to manage and look after those objects. So that you should never go to the British Museum and say, give us back our bronzes alone. You should also be saying, give us back the capacity.
That's right.
To look after those
them.
objects, which you stole from us. Anyway, that was just on that point. But I wanted to say something about indigenous knowledge, which you talked about. There's an interesting question, which is what is indigenous knowledge in the Caribbean? Because the Caribbean is the product of multiple diasporas.
That's right.
So indigenous knowledge looks quite different here than perhaps it does in other places. Well, that's just an aside. But fundamentally, and you mentioned this point, indigenous knowledge is about, at its root, is the idea that everything is connected.
Yes.
Whether it's the ancestors to the living people, we're all
connected
in the same space and interacting at the same time. Whether it's the environment and nature and communities, they're all connected and they all share.
Yes.
What changed with the Western capitalist approach to epistemology was the idea that knowledge was not connected. It was compartmentalized and then commodified.
That's right.
So that, and in fact, medicine is a classic example of that. So-called traditional medicine was based on the idea that everything impacted your health. The ancestors, the environment, and all of those different things.
Yes.
Western medicine was based on the idea that you found a root cause, a pathogen or a whatever, and you dealt with that. And you ignored everything else. Now, ironically, medicine is now going back to the idea that you have to have a holistic approach to it and so on. Anyway, but the question I have going back to the museum is that the museum is actually a creation of a Western capitalist epistemology.
That's right.
The idea that you take objects and you put them in a space.
That's right.
For people to go and look at.
Yes.
So museums, by their nature, and if you go around the British Museum and so on, very often what you find is they're largely silent and passive spaces. Yes. So what I get from the discussion that we've been having over the last day or two is that the way that you need to approach the idea of a museum going forward is to reclaim that notion of connectedness which goes with indigenous knowledge.
Yes.
And so that requires that instead of a passive and silent space full of objects, you have an interactive space which is vibrant and living and engaging the community. So that's quite I'd say, from a curator's point of view, quite a challenge.
It is quite a challenge, and I'm glad you've raised up the point about the passive and deadness of the museum structure, because for many of you, I just want you to know that when the whole idea of archives and taking artifacts came into being with the whole colonial, behavior, bad behavior, we have to understand that this was them showing off what they can do and what they've done to people who they do not acknowledge as human beings. Yeah? So hence, even more reason why we have to tackle this whole concept and approach to how these ideas and artifacts and collections and artifacts are interfaced with. The truth is this: we have to work also in tandem with the times. The reason why we don't just go and build a hub out there and put because that's what Cesar Cyrus did. He put it down into his basement. He had the museum in his basement. But the reason why it's graduated into a space where there is a university is because then it affords an opportunity for us to recognize the times. And the times are that we are now moving in a very fast, technologically advanced space where humans have been separated from these knowledges. And they come to where? Universities to learn. And they come out of universities not knowing how to behave as humans or well-caring, meaningful humans. Yeah? So the idea is to change and to use what the technology that we have, which is the university and the archive, but change within our own epistemology and practices, cultural practices, bringing those into those spaces. It's a challenge, but it's a challenge that is welcomed and will be received once you start it. And I think the fact that you've done this so far shows that it can be done. And the fact that you're drawing on someone who even did it before you, which is Cesar Cyrus, shows again that it can be done. And what it takes is what Cesar Cyrus calls selfless promptness and self-determination. That's a quote from the man himself. To make things happen. That's the only, I'm saying to you as a community and as a group sitting here who came to this lecture, that in moving forward, these are the principles and ideas that we will have to engage and flirt with. Yeah? If we are to turn things around within the way things are, we have to recognize there's an economic factor as well. Remember I mentioned that earlier in the lecture. We can't deny the economic factor, right? Whilst we will not be slaves to the economic factor, we cannot deny that there's an economic factor. So therefore, how do we then negotiate that space? Economic factor, knowledge of self, determination. It's about then bringing those factors into the space that is being already fueled. And then taking that and creating your own individual factions or creative spaces and bringing that knowledge into those spaces. We have to renegotiate if we're going to make it as a community. We have to renegotiate it if we're going to survive and thrive. And we can't be lazy about it. I'm challenging you and saying that within the even notion of decolonization, you can't decolonize anything, to be quite honest with you. You can't decolonize something that was never ours to begin with. We were never a people that needed decolonization. We were free. We were liberated. We understood certain things. And don't get me wrong, I'm using a broad brush when I say that. Clearly there's parts of history that are whatever. But what I'm saying is in terms of our general conscientization around humanity, we are a group of people that don't love to create war if we don't have to. Yeah, that's not us. Yeah, if we have to, well, but we don't go about it just for the sake of showing I have a bigger gun than you. And so therefore, that's why I'm saying we must rely on our cultural competencies. And we must rely on who we are, not who we were, who we are. Thank you.
Good afternoon, all. Esteemed guests, colleagues, students, and staff. On behalf of all entities involved, I would like to thank you all for attending today's lecture. Special thanks to Ms. Connie Bell for gracing our series with her presence and interactive presentation. Built around the topic of archiving and the great man, Dr. Cecil Cyrus, and his work. I would also like to extend thanks to the coordinating teams behind the scenes, the Faculty of Medical Sciences team, the Medical Sciences Library team, the UWI Marketing and Communications team, and to my colleagues, Dr. Janine Knight, Medical Librarian, Dr. Damian Cohol, Faculty of Medical Sciences Dean, and everyone else who made this event a success, especially you, the audience. Once again, I thank you all for coming, and I hope to see you again at our next lecture on Monday, May 12th. Thanks, and enjoy.